Okay, let's kick off today's webinar, GDPR for health tech developers. We have a nice small select group this morning, so please feel free to ask me any questions that you have throughout today's webinar. It is being recorded and will be available on our website and our YouTube channel early next week, in the next 3 days. So my name is Kellie Peters. I'm the co-founder of Databasix, and I've been working with data protection, information governance for 20 plus years in public and private sector. And I'm a little bit passionate about data protection. We was originally going to do health tech developers later on in the year. However, there's been quite a lot in the news recently about some of the issues that are being faced with some of the health tech technology that is on the marketplace. So I felt it would be appropriate to bring it forward. So some of you will have attended some of these webinars before, so it will not be a surprise that we really should be thinking about privacy, and that under the general data protection regulation, if you are developing a app for a mobile phone or a new piece of software that is going to work with health data, patient information, it is sensitive data, so we do need to bear in mind that under the regulation, you have to conduct a data protection impact assessment. And this makes sure that you are mindful of the risks for you as an organization, but also you are considering the risks on the individuals because of the type of data that is typically collected in health tech software. There are greater risks to the individuals if anything happens to that data. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to use real examples to emphasize some of my points. There will also be a time for questions at the end of the webinar. So we really want to be thinking privacy throughout the design process of new systems and technology when we launch them, and then the ongoing support, as well as revisiting it when we are thinking about upgrading or linking our tool to other systems that are in fact out there on the market. So the first thing I want everybody to be thinking about is thinking about privacy as the default. So privacy by design has always been a concept in data protection. It is not new, but it becomes more important under the GDPR. And I think that's been emphasized by some of the stories that have hit the press before the regulation came into effect. So you may recall a couple of years ago, there was a lot of discussion around the Google DeepMind receiving information from the royal free that was very specific about certain diseases. It was very much patient identifiable information, and it was incredibly sensitive. The challenges that were faced could that information genuinely be shared between the NHS organisation and Google DeepMind, in particular when it was felt that individuals, the patients themselves, were not aware that this exchange from public sector to private sector was going on. And there was a lot of challenge about, had you considered the privacy aspect of this before you went ahead with the design? So always be thinking about the individual's data must be protected. That must be the priority. You must ensure that you're only collecting information that is fair and is lawful. So lawful is about what is the basis that you're going to be relying on to collect, store and share that information. And if you don't have a lawful basis, then you really shouldn't be going any further with that application until you can determine what is appropriate. So always ask yourself when you're innovating that you may have, a world-beating idea that is going to change the world of patients and GPs or NHS frontline staff or social care workers, but always be thinking about fairness. Is it fair what you're collecting, and do you have a lawful basis for processing that information? And the Google DeepMind went on for a couple of years, and there is still some debate about the sharing of that data. So one of the things that you can consider is conducting what is referred to as a data protection impact assessment. So a way of being able to think privacy a step further is embedding privacy into the design process. So I've taken an example from the Information Commissioner's Office about the 9 steps to work through when completing a privacy impact assessment. So identify the need for a data protection impact assessment. So in this instance, when you're thinking about your new development or the app that you have or the software system for Healthtech, you want to be thinking about the volume of information that you are going to be collecting. What is the type of personal data? And in particular, what is the sensitive health related information you are going to be collecting or connecting to other data sets? And what is the risk? What is the risk to the individuals of harm if that information gets into the wrong hands, whether it be emotional distress or whether it is going to be physical harm, for example. So that will determine whether or not you take forward your data protection impact assessment. I would argue that pretty much all health tech apps should conduct it because of the type of data that you are collecting. So describe your processing. So is it about being able to conduct video consultations over the phone with a doctor? Is it about using a phone to use the camera to detect burns or marks or abrasions? What is it that your system is doing and what's it processing, and what is it processing it for? Is it to make a diagnosis? Is it to support a treatment plan? Is it to help individuals at home who are not as mobile, and you as an external organisation need to support them? So what is the processing? You may need to consider consultation. So if it's going to be a product that you want to roll out nationally, consider consultation, which is what's happening with the NHS track and trace, should I say. And they are consulting and kind of doing a mini phase of it in the Isle of Wight. Really assess, is it necessary? So always be thinking about, is it necessary, the data that you're going to be collecting, and is it fair? So is it proportional to what you're going to be collecting to what is expected from the individual? So is it balanced, or is it too heavily weighed on your perspective? So think about if you're going to be introducing artificial intelligence or maybe facial recognition, are you, by collecting certain information, going to have a lot more information which may put you in a position of power over that individual? And I think something that's very rife at the moment is this kind of profiling of individuals. So think about the proportionality. Think about all of the risks, and it may be as simple as, right from the point of when they download the app or software system onto their device or their computer to the point where they no longer need to use it. What are all the risks in storing the data, keeping it secure, backing the data up, transferring it from the individual to the point that it gets to the device, to the point that it then goes to a centralized server or a system in the cloud, for example? And those risks will then enable you to think about what controls you're going to put in place, because if something goes wrong, you want to be able to go back to the controls to say, okay, what went wrong? Why did this not work? You want to be making sure that you can mitigate. And if you can't mitigate the risk, then you really need to be thinking about, should you be going forward with that particular component part of the system? You want to make sure that you sign off. So if you're as a developer, you're part of a project team, you want to be making sure that all the changes are being signed off. And where sign off hasn't been given, I really wouldn't go live with them, because you want that accountability through the design and implementation and ongoing development of the system. Obviously, make sure that any risks that you've identified and contingencies, there may be a cost associated with that. They need to be built into any of your planning of your system development. And always make sure you keep it under review. So a data protection impact assessment isn't a one and done. It's, if you're going to make a significant change to the system, you want to be revisiting the privacy impact assessment and making sure, again, you consider purpose, lawfulness, risks, mitigation, for example. So you really embed privacy into the entire design and ongoing design process. What we then want to be thinking about, if the next slide will come up, is have a robust plan for contingencies, because things will go wrong. Invariably, we don't live in a perfect world. There is no perfect system out there. There are always flaws, even if you've thought that you've considered every potential flaw. Someone using the system will always do something unexpected that you have never considered before that causes a significant problem to the tool, the app, or the software system. So what happens when things go wrong? So what measures are you putting in place to make sure that you can maintain the ongoing confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the system? And the example I've got here is the one of last week, where a patient logged into their Babylon Health app on their phone, and they realized that they could see video recordings of other patients' consultations with their doctors. Now, it wasn't many other individuals, but the fact that they could was a significant risk. So the integrity of that system was brought into question. And because of that, they've had to report this to the Information Commissioner and make sure that this error has been plugged very quickly. If your app goes offline, for whether it be because of a malicious attack, because of a ransomware incident, or simply because there's been a malfunction or a power cuts bring systems down on the time, what is your backup and resilience plan? Do you have a disaster recovery plan for that? And how quickly can you restore that system? Because the longer a system is down, the greater the questions about trust come into it, because people start to feel a little bit weary about, especially if it's their health data. And always, and I'm sure any IT or developers on this will, I would hope, resonate with the fact that regular testing is something that's actually important. You want to, especially when you're going to implement a new change to the system, test it, put it in a test environment, then go live with it. Always have the option to roll back if something goes wrong. So make sure you're constantly evaluating the risks for that, because something will always go wrong. So then it's about making sure that when something does go wrong, you have a process in place that you can quickly identify what that is. You can consider whether or not you need to report it to the Information Commissioner. You can consider whether or not you need to advise individuals of the breach, and whether or not, if you're processing information on behalf of an NHS organisation, being very clear about how swiftly you can notify them of the breach. So where you are developing a tool, being able to know what's gone wrong and being able to advise people immediately of what's happened and what you're doing with it is fundamental. So you have a requirement to have a breach process in place, and you need to be able to know, even if you're the developer, who gets notified or in your organization that there has been a breach, who's going to take the lead on an investigation, who's going to take the lead in terms of engaging with the individuals or the regulators, for example. So a breach isn't just a loss. It might be individuals feel that actually the volume of patient data that you have or health data is really interesting and really juicy. So obviously inappropriate access. So what measures are you putting in place to stop that? Does your system send information to the wrong, inadvertently, wrong people? Or in the case of the breach here, what happened with the System 1, which is a large tool system that is used by GP practices across the country. It was not making a note when an individual said, there's certain things I don't want you to tell me about because it's just marketing information. They was not updating the record to reflect the fact that the individual was saying, no, I don't want you to send me this information. No, I don't need to share this information with certain people. And because of that, they inadvertently released 150,000 patients' data to research and auditing organizations, and they got a little frustrated by that. So if you're giving people options, make sure that your system can respect those options, because individuals do have rights and your systems have to support those individuals' rights, which links me nicely on to the next slide, which is very much about respecting individuals' rights. So we want to be able to respect the privacy. So if you're designing a tool, whether it be an app or a software system, individuals have the right to be informed about what your system is and how your system is using their data. They have the right to know what information is stored in their system. So if you are developing a tool that's going to support digital health in NHS or primary care organisations, or for care homes, for example, your system has to be able to support the right of access request that may come through an NHS organisation that says, I want to know what information you hold on me, and you will be part of that chain. So how can your system support the request to say, I want to know what you hold on me? And then in support of that, where there is the basis for processing is maybe consent, for example, or legitimate interest, your system has to support the right to be forgotten. So how can your system delete data securely so it doesn't impact on the integrity of the other data contained within your solution? But how can you then give confidence to the individual that the data has definitely been deleted? And when we're thinking about the right to be forgotten, we're thinking about deleted from all systems. And if you are providing a system where the individual has the option to move their data from your software platform to another software platform, make sure your software solution can support the right of portability. So when you're thinking about individual rights, you're thinking about privacy, you're thinking about the purposes and having a breach notification. One of the things that individuals will ask, or a regulator will ask, is, why do you have this information on me? So your philosophy has got to be only collect what you need. So there may be lots of data that you think that's really nice to have, or it'd be really great for us to be able to do this type of profiling. But if it is not necessary to make decisions, then you have to challenge yourself whether or not it's necessary. So the data minimization principle within the regulation is clear: only collect what you absolutely need. There's nothing stopping you in the future collecting more data, and that your system supports that, but always revisit that, which is why the DPIA is a very important process. So ask yourself, do you have enough information to make the decisions that you do? Or is it providing sufficient information for your customers to make the decisions that they need to make? And then demonstrating accountability is incredibly important, because as a developer, or being as part of that kind of development role, you are one person in a team of people that have a responsibility for data protection. So this is about making sure that your organization provides the relevant training for you in terms of understanding what is privacy by design, what is a data protection impact assessment, how do you conduct that? Or if it's not you, how does the member of your team, or the project manager, or the lead for your development have the skills to do that? So it is incredibly important that there is a chain of command in terms of understanding where data gets escalated, where problems get escalated to, whether it be subject access requests or data breaches, but also highlighting the risks. So it doesn't just fall on your shoulders. Who else is going to support that process? Because if things go wrong, one of the questions the information commissioner is going to ask, if you are having to notify them, is, talk to me about the training that's happened in this organization. I want you to demonstrate that. So accountability is core to GDPR. So how do you support accountability in your organization, but how does your organization support you and the staff in your team in that development process? So then what we really need to be thinking about is, what are the tools then that you can apply to what I've just covered and stuff that might be useful to you. So there are several tools that could be helpful. As an organization, the tool that you are developing will have a specific set of purposes. It will have a specific set of data that it's going to be collecting. And this should be part of the organization's register of processing activities. And you may be asked by your customers to provide them with information about what you're processing. So the register of processing activities allows you to answer those questions. You want to have a robust data breach reporting process, so an approach that allows you to log breaches, an approach that allows you to investigate it, and a very clear notification process. Data protection impact assessments for when you're developing health technology, I feel, are fundamental. So really have do you need to conduct one, a screening kind of form, and then the actual assessment itself, supported by the outcomes and demonstrating how you embed that in the project. And then the demonstrating the accountability is training plans. What are the messages that are being sent out to teams about development, about risks, about notification of breaches and stuff. So it makes it practical and understandable. So data protection policies and training programs, for example. So that has been quite a whistle-stop tour of what I feel is quite important from a development perspective for Healthtech. We have some time for questions before I do a little bit about who Databasix is and how we can support individuals with what I've covered. So are there any immediate questions from anyone that's on the line at the moment about what I've covered, or something that you would like a little bit more clarity on? Please do type in the text box. What I would then do is I would quickly just, if you permit me, I just want to do a very quick talk about what Databasix does. So we have launched our Databasix GDPR toolbox, which does have essential tools to support data breach, subject access requests, how to set up your data protection team, practical ways of working for individual staff and for DPOs and data protection leads to be able to push out to their staff. So the toolbox is for individuals in organizations responsible for data protection. And this gives you that kind of easy access, practical tools with video guidance to help you not feel overwhelmed when something goes wrong. We have our fun podcasts that we do once a week, which chew the fat, and we do it. It's released every Monday. We do obviously then provide training both online and in classrooms if we're ever allowed to step foot outside of our houses. And we do have our website as well. So feel free to check that out and obviously ask me any questions that you may have afterwards, because this might not be the appropriate forum for that. If there aren't any questions, what I would say is, thank you for bearing with me this morning and letting the webinar start 15 minutes later. I do appreciate that. I hope what I've talked about has made sense from a software development perspective in the healthcare setting. There will be a copy of this recording, as I said, that will be made available to you. If any of you would like to have a conversation with me, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to have quick chats. But if there is nothing, that was a rather efficient, quick webinar. Um, I really thank you very much for your time today. I hope you all have a productive rest of the day. And for anyone that's listening to this afterwards, our contact details can be found on our website. So thank you. Keep safe and sane. And I hope I see you again at another webinar. So take care of yourselves.